Hi, I'm Grace.
And I'm Kaytlin, and this is our interpersonal communication critique of Jojo Rabbit. The film uses highly effective interpersonal communication from culture, the self, and interpersonal relationships.
This movie uses intercultural communication to illustrate JoJo learning other-oriented communication. Ethnocentrism, prejudice, and stereotypes were all major parts of the Nazi ideology. JoJo had been indoctrinated by the Hitler Youth to believe that he is superior because of his Aryan genetics. JoJo expresses his prejudices by being a young Nazi fanatic. Obviously, he has terrible intercultural communication skills, but the contact hypothesis helps explain how JoJo learns about communicating with people who are different from him. This theory suggests that the more contact you have with someone who is different from you, the more positive regard you will have for that person. Jojo uses Elsa as a source for his book, You Who Jude, which leads him to spend more time around her and they develop a friendship. When he questions Elsa, he realizes that there is no difference between him and Jewish people. The final piece of this puzzle is becoming other-oriented. Jojo's experience with Elsa leads to tremendous growth in the amount of empathy he expresses. Social decentering can be hard for a 10-year-old boy, but realizing his mother opposed the Nazis and was hiding a Jewish girl helped give him the ability to look at the war from a different perspective.
Throughout the movie, it was shown that the 7 dimensions of Nazi culture had a huge effect on Jojo's interpersonal communication. First, Germany was a very collectivistic culture. They valued team achievement as long as it was for the Nazi party and expected 100% support from everyone. Two, Germany's culture was also a low context culture. While swastikas and Nazi uniforms were an important part of the culture Jojo grew up in, they heavily relied on verbal messages to know if someone truly supported the Nazi party, such as Hail Hitler. Three, Jojo grew up in a very masculine culture. As seen in the picture, all the boys at the Hitler Youth Camp were taught activities such as grenade throwing, gas defense, and ambush, while at the same camp, the girls were taught how to nurse wounds and make beds. Four, the strict nature of the German culture made it a very low tolerance culture. This was shown in Jojo's interactions with his mom and Elsa when he felt they had not been following the rules. Five, Germany's power was also very centralized. Hitler was a dictator and everyone was expected to follow his rule. As seen when Jojo's house was raided, the government had all control and enforced their rigid rules however they pleased. Six, Germany's culture was a long-term culture. As seen in this picture, young boys were prepared to become Nazi officers at a young age because the intent was that they would grow old under Hitler's power. And lastly, Germany's culture was a more restrained culture. For example, the children were sent to Hitler's youth camps instead of participating in fun leisure activities.
When you watch this movie, one big thing that sticks out is the changes in JoJo's self-concept. His material and social changes are easy to identify. We can see his material self as his clothing choices slowly change from his Hitler Youth uniform to plain clothes, as he becomes less connected to the Nazi party. His social self is also clear as he spends less time with the Nazis and his friend Yorkie and more time with Elsa. The spiritual self can be hard to observe, but the movie uses imaginary Hitler to communicate JoJo's spiritual self. Hitler starts off as a surprisingly light character who is enchanted with the Nazi party. Like any 10-year-old boy, Hitler has a very basic view of the world that has yet to be challenged. Hitler is used as the narrator to JoJo's thoughts and feelings to show the development of JoJo's values and beliefs. We can also see the change in stability that JoJo experiences by how disheveled Hitler looks. By the end of the movie, we see the most major change in JoJo's spiritual self when he realigns himself against the Nazis and boots Hitler out of the window.
Jojo's 3 social needs greatly impacted his interpersonal communication throughout the movie. His need for inclusion was shown at the Hitler Youth Camp when a Nazi officer said, "We wanted hardened warriors who are prepared to kill at will. Can you do that?" But Jojo was unable to kill the rabbit. He wanted to be included, but naturally couldn't under those terms. Jojo's need for control shined through after he found Elsa hidden in his house. He kept going to speak to Elsa and saying things like, "We must make a compromise," and "I have some conditions that allow you to stay here in my house," because he had to have control over the situation. Jojo's need for affection was altered over the course of the movie. First, Jojo received a strong feeling of love from his mother, but when she passed away, and as he got to know Elsa, that need for affection transitioned to Elsa.
Interpersonal communication takes place between two people. Of course, this tends to lead to interpersonal relationships, which is highlighted in the relationship between Jojo and Elsa. You might ask, why didn't Jojo turn Elsa in? Well, social exchange theory can explain. The idea behind this theory is that people make relationship decisions by assessing and comparing the costs and rewards. We get 2 looks at Jojo going through this process in the movie. One we see with Hitler as Jojo is weighing his decision to say anything. Ultimately, Jojo decides that a Jew living in your wall is better than 2 Jews flying around eating innocent Nazis. Quote. The second time is during a conversation with Captain Klinzendorf, when Jojo decides that he can benefit by keeping Elsa hidden and using her to write a book on Jewish people and then turning the book into the authorities. In a conversation with Elsa, Jojo lays out the immediate rewards and costs of their relationship, which would be staying out of trouble versus death for both of them, and the forecasted rewards, which would be continued safety for Elsa and potentially medals and rewards for Jojo. They both agree that the rewards outweigh the costs and decide to work on the book.
Symbolic interaction theory can be applied to Jojo's interpretations of the world and how they change throughout the movie due to his interactions. First, Jojo had a strong interpretation of the world that stemmed from the words and symbols used by the Nazis. For example, at the Hitler Youth Camp, the children described Jewish people as having horns, serpent tongues, fangs, green blood, and claws because that's what they had been told. This interpretation of Jewish people quickly changed when Jojo met Elsa because Elsa, a Jew, did not symbolize what the Nazis had ingrained in his mind for so long.